The 2024 NFL season is approaching faster than Jordan Addison's court date to get his license removed, and we've seen a lot of big moves this season. Today, I want to get into some breakout candidates I have going into this next season, some of the players I think that are going to be better than they were, that are going to just really kind of come out of the shell, a lot of younger guys, a lot of guys that are in year 2, 3, or 4, or whatever. To be clear on this, with the breakout candidates, I kind of basically made like a first and second team all-pro, but just with breakout candidates. Really, and I'll explain each of them as I go, but this is kind of an open thought process a little bit of like who I'm considering to be a breakout candidate. You'll see as we go, but there's some guys that breakout doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have an MVP caliber season or anything. It just means, hey, things were really, really bad this year or last year. Let's, see if they can be not that bad and they can be acceptable. Let's just get right into it. I'll start with the quarterbacks. The first guy I have on my breakout candidate list is Trevor Lawrence. So Trevor has had an interesting timeline going into his NFL career, being the number 1 overall pick, the Jaguars tanking for him and everything, and then his rookie year was a total disaster. But I can kind of write it off because of Urban Meyer and Tim Tebow. That was crazy. And just everything that happened that year, I write off the rookie year. Next year wasn't fantastic, but in the second half of the year, things really came along. And then we get to his third year this last year, which was disappointing. I'd say most people thought it was disappointing. The first half of this season, they looked really good, and then just kind of went downhill, and they missed the playoffs despite being, I think, 7-1 or something like that at some point. A lot of people blame Trevor Lawrence, and look, he didn't have a great year. I will admit that. But watching Trevor Lawrence play football this season, it didn't feel like a young quarterback that didn't have all the pieces together and, still didn't really know what they're doing. It felt like when Kirk Cousins has a down year, It wasn't that he was making dumb 24-year-old mistakes. It's that things just weren't clicking well on the offense. And I was honestly disappointed in the offense that they did bring in. They brought in what I thought was a bunch of number 2 and 3 receivers to be, his main receiving core, and they never really got a 1 in there. But with Trevor this year, why I do have him on this list, look, he's got this contract, this big contract that they gave him. He better break out, right? That's one of the main reasons I have him on this list, is he kind of has to. But more than that, I believe that he can. Looking at how last season went, most of the issues, while there are plenty of things that are fixable, you can always fix things and make them better. A lot of the issues last year were just that they didn't get lucky. They had a lot of balls that weren't caught, that were just an inch away, and I totally see a rebound coming this year. Now, with that being said, it is a tough division, and last year, if you were going to be really good in that division, it was the best year to do it, because that was before CJ Stroud got Stephon Diggs and everything. For Trevor, this is going to be a big year to prove that he is worth that contract he got, and that he's everything that people thought he could be when he was number 1 pick, and I don't see that. I think people had really high expectations for him, and thinking with the number 1 overall pick, I don't know if he'll meet that exactly, but Trevor to me is easily a franchise quarterback that has settled in and just needs to find a groove with his team. With the weapons they brought in, Brian Thomas Jr., I most definitely think he could do that. Next up, I have 4 quarterbacks. By the way, I should have said this. I have like 4 people for each position. The next quarterback, Bryce Young, another number 1 overall pick. I'm projecting Bryce Young to have a breakout season, and this is kind of what I meant in the beginning when I said there's different variations of breakout. Obviously, Bryce Young and Trevor Lawrence are going to have completely different seasons, but at this point, when I say breakout, what I really mean for Bryce Young is what we saw last year, I think is not going to happen again. There's a lot of pieces and moving parts going into this season and in the offseason that have just made this team playable, right? That wasn't them last year. Now, this isn't a team that's ready to dominate in the playoffs and beat the Chiefs or anything like that, But I do look at this team, I look at the offensive line. More importantly, I look at the coaching staff, and it just really seems like everyone knows what they're doing. I'm a huge fan of Dave Canales. They've fixed the receiving core. It isn't perfect. It's not how you want it for the long-term future, but you have everything you need. You have, Deontay Johnson to play over the middle and intermediate areas. He's one of the best separators in the league. I mean that. Say what you want about him as an overall receiver, but the stats don't lie. Just in terms of getting separation, he is one of the best at it in the league. And then you have Adam Thielen, who's going to play that really short, slot role. And they just drafted Xavier Legette to be their boundary, go-get-it, jump ball guy, speed threat. So the pieces are really coming together. There's more that they did in the draft. I already talked about that, so I don't want to get into it too much. Bryce Young is still someone I very much believe in. I think at this point now we're kind of looking and comparing CJ to Bryce Young so much. I don't think that's fair. At the end of the day, I think maybe CJ was the better quarterback, but that doesn't mean Bryce Young is bad, and that doesn't mean they're going to have to move off from him or anything like that. I still think he's going to be very good. I think he can still live up to the expectations that people had for him when he originally came into the league. It's just about getting him there. And given the offseason that the Panthers had, I think they're going to do it, and I think he's going to have at least a passable year that lets everyone know, oh, this wasn't a screw-up, he's not a bust, he's going to be okay. That's what I'm projecting for this year for Bryce Young. Next up, this has been a quarterback in a team I've been on for a while, and that is Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. A little bit late for a breakout necessarily, but we haven't seen Kyler be who he is in a few years. He's been dealing with injuries, and they've been dealing with a lot of issues on the team. I think this is the year the Cardinals maybe, aren't the best team in the league, but I think they look pretty good. And I think Kyler Murray is going to surprise a lot of people. A lot of the people who make the Call of Duty jokes and everything are going to be kind of shocked. He is a really good quarterback. He is top. I think by the end of this season, he'll easily be top 10. At this point in time, it's tough to say how, people feel about him or whatever, but Kyler Murray is a quarterback that I really like, and I think he deserves to be mentioned in terms of a breakout candidate list. Even though he's a little bit older, this is going to be a big year for him, and it's going to be a really big prove-it year for him too. After he got the contract a little while ago and everything. So yeah, I believe in him. I believe that they're going to get it done. I like the fact that he has Marvin Harrison Jr. now. The defense is looking a little bit better. With all that being said, they are going to put the best scheme in front of him, and I think he's going to be able to run it at a pretty efficient level. I think he's going to have a solid year. Anthony Richardson, next quarterback up. This one feels pretty obvious. Misses last season due to injury, but while he's out there, he looks pretty good. Like, a lot of people were talking about how raw he is and doesn't know what he's doing. And the first few games that he played in the NFL, he looked like a very capable quarterback. And more than capable, he looked like he could be pretty dangerous if you don't keep an eye on him, especially in the run game. So barring injury, at this point in time right now, I'm looking at this Colts roster. I like the receiving room a lot. Josh Downs and Michael Pittman, a great duo. You toss in Alec Pierce. They draft Adonai Mitchell. There's weapons all over the place. The tight end room is actually a little bit underrated. The offensive line is better than people think. It struggled a couple years back, but that was due to the coaching staff, in my opinion. I think Frank Reich was there at the time when it was at its worst, and everywhere he goes, they have terrible offensive line. But Shane Steichen, really, really bright offensive play caller, young, and he knows what he's talking about. And Anthony Richardson is such an easy pick for a breakout candidate list like this. He looked great last year. All the pieces are just in place. I know what they're planning to do, how they're going to run their system, and it just seems so deadly. They're going to tear up quarters and, off zone. People are going to be running mainly zone against them. You're not going to be running much man. And the plan is to run a lot of RPOs and run it with Anthony Richardson, which is a pretty good plan when you're trying to run it with him because he's big. He just needs to learn to slide. But this one feels pretty obvious to me, Anthony Richardson, as a breakout candidate for this next season. Moving on to different position, the running backs. First one that comes to mind, and I have a lot of good reasoning for this one, Najee Harris is going to be the running back that I think is going to have a really big year. Now, the last few seasons since he's been drafted, he hasn't quite lived up to the expectations of being a first-round running back, right? he's still been good, and that's something people don't talk about. He's been top 10 in rushing yards as long as he's been in the league every year, and he's still a dangerous weapon. He still has the potential to be a very lethal back. Here are some of the issues that he's faced since being drafted to the Steelers. Poor offensive line play, and honestly, I did not like the scheme that they had running with him. What I saw the last few seasons from the Steelers was a lot of gap and power. They bring in Arthur Smith from the Falcons. Say what you want about him as a head coach, but as an offensive coordinator, he's not bad. He's a really good mind in terms of just developing and play calling and stuff. He runs a lot of wide zone. That's what he likes to do. He's malleable, and he's going to call a bunch of different stuff, but wide zone and some inside zone is really what he likes to do. To me, that's where I see Najee Harris's bread and butter being. He's not a high acceleration guy. He's a little bit slower. He takes some time to build up his speed. It does remind me a little bit of Derrick Henry. You go back and watch those Titan years, a lot of his biggest runs are on those like outside zone stretches or whatever, wide zone runs and everything. He's able to build up his momentum and find an edge, and then once he gets rolling, it's hard to stop him. I feel really similar with Najee Harris. He has a similar build, and he's big and powerful in that way. So obviously running a lot of power and gap is good, especially in short yardage situations with a back like that, because he's guaranteed to get you a yard or two if you need it. But I think this new system that Arthur Smith is going to be bringing, I know he's going to want to run the ball. That system issue I mentioned is going to be fixed. I think they're going to have a much better scheme in place for him to run the ball. The second thing is the offensive line is incredibly better. The draft, that's mainly what they tackled. I think they took 3 offensive linemen. Let's see, just Troy Fatanu, McCormick, and there's another one I can't remember. But 3 guys that were awesome. That's a really big deal. And a lot of the guys that they did take in the draft were guys that I thought could be impact players right away. Not necessarily guys that are going to take 2 to 3 years to develop and then you can try sticking him somewhere. Troy Fatanu is a player that I think starts week 1 and looks like he belongs. So those are the 2 main things. That's 2 main reasons why Najee Harris is on this list. It's been a few years. Some people have been disappointed with how he's played based off of where he's been drafted. But with the new system in place, new play caller, you account for the fact that Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, whoever's playing and starting, is on at quarterback. That's, an extra person you have to account for. That's one less person that is accounting for Najee Harris. So tons of reasons why Najee could have a breakout year, even this late into his career, kind of. I'm excited to see how the Steelers handle that. Next up, another kind of obvious one, a year 2 guy, Bijan Robinson. Bijan is fantastic, and the Falcons kind of look like they know what they're doing now. And Raheem Morris is awesome. I'm a huge fan of him as a coach. That staff is amazing. That's one of the best staffs in the league. When you look at it top to bottom, not just head coach and offensive coordinator, the individual coaches and just every little tiny cog and piece that they have on this team is ready to succeed. So Bijan is just someone I had to naturally toss on this list. Plus, he's one of the most talented and gifted running backs we've seen since Saquon Barkley. So that one's pretty obvious. I don't want to spend too much more time on that. But next up, I will say J.K. Dobbins. Now, this is one I went back and forth on quite a bit. I wasn't sure, because here's my thing with J.K. Dobbins. He's been injured a few times now, and whenever I've seen him get back on the field after injury, he still looks good, but you notice where he's lacking a step, right? He got slower after the injury. And after all the injuries, he's been injured a lot. But the reason I do put him on the breakout candidate list and as someone to watch out for is he has a really good rotation right now with Gus Edwards and is it Josh Kelly that's still there, or is it the other one? Either way, there's other backs that are going to be rotating in and out. He's not going to be getting 100% of the load. This offensive line, though, is looking a lot better. And when you look at what John Harbaugh is bringing in, he takes Joe Alt at number 5, and the system he wants to bring in and everything, how he's made it very clear and evident since he's gotten there, we're going to run the ball down your throat. That's mainly why J.K. Dobbins is on this list. I still think he's a very capable and good back, and when you look at the line that you're putting behind, if we are going to be running some wide zone and stuff. We're getting out to the tackles where we have, Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt reach blocking for us. That's pretty deadly. That's exciting. It doesn't really matter too much who you have there. I just have a feeling that whoever is starting for the Chargers running back room is probably going to be getting a lot of good looks this season. And then next up, fourth guy for my running backs, I have Zamir White, running back on the Raiders. This is like year 2 or 3 for him. He hasn't been given first team reps because Josh Jacobs has been in the building. But last season when Josh Jacobs went down, he looked really good. He got the ball a lot and was efficient with the yards he had. Bigger, powerful back from Georgia. I like a lot of what he's doing. He looks really strong. He looks ready to take on this role and this challenge of now being the starter for the team. I look at the offensive line, and there are some missing pieces, 100%. But when you look at, I like Colton Miller at left tackle, Andre James at center, and then they draft Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon this year, who's another one of those offensive linemen I think is ready to go right now. Not in terms of pass protection, I think that's going to take him a minute to get going, but in terms of run blocking, he's one of the most pro-ready rookies, at least interior-wise, that I saw. So that's fine. That's a fine, three-piece trio that they have there on the offensive line, and giving him this, first team reps. Alexander Madison is also on this team. I don't think he's going to steal reps from Zamir. I think Zamir is going to steal the starting job and have a very good season. We're talking, a little over 1,000 yards, maybe 8-9 touchdowns or so or whatever, and a few hundred receiving yards too. So it's going to be a good year for Zamir White. Maybe not a breakout in terms of having like a record-breaking year or anything, but I think we're going to be able to see Zamir White after this season if he gets what we think he is. We don't imagine injury is going to happen, then it's going to be a good year for him. On to the next position group, receivers. This one's going to be a little bit unfair because the first thing I put down was the entire Packers receiving core. I don't know which one to pick. I'd say if I really have to boil it down, it's between Jaden Reed and Christian Watson. Those are the two guys that I'm a really big fan of on that receiving core that have the most ability to really just blow up this season. We saw Jordan Love last year and all that he became in the latter half of the season. And looking at this receiving core, it's so young, so many guys that just entered the NFL within 3 years. I don't know which one to pick necessarily. I'm a really big fan of Jaden Reed and Christian Watson, like I said. So it's either of those two guys, but Jordan Love is going to give the ball to everyone. He's going to spread it out. There's a reason we're talking about him getting a big contract extension again. It's because he's really good. So yeah, it's pick your poison there. Christian Watson, the issues that I have with him is he can't stay healthy. We've seen that so far in his career. He's had a lot of issues with that. Jaden Reed doesn't project to me to be a number 1 receiver, but as a number 2 and someone that can work in and out of the slot, even get on the outside and run deep routes or whatever, he's very scary in that manner. So, yeah, Jordan Love and that receiving core, even, I'm not talking about tight ends yet, but I can mention them too, Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. Luke Musgrave I was really high on last season when he was drafted. He reminds me a lot of Mark Andrews. Not that he's going to be as good as him, but just similar kind of frame and play style in my opinion. So if you can get a connection going like that, it doesn't matter if it's your tight end or not. They've got a lot of really young, really great options to look at for this season, and I believe in Jordan Love to get the ball to him. Next up for receivers, I narrowed it down a little bit more instead of just saying an entire room. Jameson Williams. This one, more than anything, is like a gut feeling. This is me watching media pressers that the Lions have, because nothing's more hype than watching the Lion media and stuff. It's so good. It's my favorite stuff on the planet right now. But everyone's talking about Jameson Williams and all the work he's done this offseason, how his attitude's changed. He's developed as a leader. He's becoming the whole package. So Jameson Williams is someone that I'm really keeping an eye on this season. We know how fast he is, and he was taken from Alabama, and he was a top-of-the-line receiver when he was drafted, and he's been somewhat of a disappointment so far, 2 seasons down, but you got to consider that that's mainly been due to injury and his own issues with gambling. I'm pretty sure it was betting on games. He got suspended for like 6 weeks or something like that. So this season for Jameson Williams, I have high hopes. He's a very talented receiver. Obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta are going to be first and second in terms of who's getting the ball. But Jameson Williams is the kind of guy that, with his speed and how much of a deep threat he is and has the potential to be, maybe he doesn't get the ball a lot. Maybe he gets the ball, he gets 3 or 4 catches a game. But he'll probably still end up with 110-something yards because those are all deep routes. So Jameson Williams is someone I'm really looking forward to have a great year. Next up is Drake London. Drake London, main reason for this is the Falcons have a quarterback. If not, they have 2 of them. So at this point, that's kind of been the issue with the Falcons and this is the second time I'm talking about the Falcons, but you'll see me mention a few teams a couple times on this just because I believe in the team a lot. But Drake London is a very talented receiver that Kirk Cousins is going to love giving the ball to because he's just going to snag it over people's heads pretty easily. He's got a crazy, long, big frame. He's strong. And one thing that surprised me a lot about Drake London is he is a good athlete, and he does make cuts pretty well. He's not top of the line in terms of route running and just general agility and cutting. He's never going to be. He's like 6'4", but for his size, for being 6'4", it's a lot more acceptable than I thought it would be. Drake London going into, I believe, his 3rd season. Yeah, a lot to look forward to. He's the number 1 receiving option, maybe barring, Kyle Pitts. Depends how you look at it. I know they're kind of moving him around with tight end and receiver, but for Drake London, yeah, it's going to be a big season for him. This offense is going to get rolling, and it's going to be designed, the passing game at the very least is going to be designed through him. A lot of weapons. You got to deal with Kyle Pitts and Bijan kind of stealing the ball from you and everything. Darnell Mooney's there now, but at this point, I am a firm believer that Drake London is going to be the number 1 receiving threat on the team, and he's not going to let him down. And the last receiver I have marked down is Michael Wilson, the receiver out of Arizona. One thing I did want to say really quick is obviously no rookies on this list because if I'm going to pick a receiver from Arizona, I'd probably pick Marvin Harrison Jr., but that might not even be true because when I look at this team, I look at the fact that they did get Marvin Harrison Jr. Awesome pick. I love it. I'm so ecstatic for the Cardinals and everything. Here's the thing, though. People know who Marvin Harrison Jr. is. Despite him being a rookie, they are going to try to lock him up because they know that if they can do that, then they have a much better chance of, getting pressure in Kyler's face and making him get skittish or whatever. So with that being said, you take a quarterback, especially a quarterback like Kyler, who's known to get a little bit skittish when he doesn't have his options available. You take away the number 1 receiver, that's great, but now you have someone like Michael Wilson who is like a diet Devontae Adams. That's really high praise, but just like when I said that Luke Musgrave reminds me of Mark Andrews, I kind of mean something similar. They're just a very similar play style. I think neither of those guys are very fast, but they have great hands, work really well in the slot, really fluid athletes, great change of direction, incredible route running too. Michael Wilson stepped up a lot for the Cardinals last season, and I still think he's going to be given every opportunity to do that, even with Marvin Harrison there, especially with Marvin Harrison there. Now he's on the number 2 cornerback. I'm someone that thinks that Michael Wilson could very well become a number 2 receiver and be a good one and a comfortable one at that. This is a great season for that to happen, too. I wouldn't be surprised if he's around 1,000 yards this season and people are like, yo, where'd this Michael Wilson come from? And I told you about him, so make sure you subscribe because I told you about Michael Wilson. That is it for the receivers. Moving on to tight end. I'm going to call it the Cardinals again. What a surprise. Trey McBride, first guy on the tight end list. Look, he's at this point showing that he's the total package. Good size, good athleticism, some run after catch ability, solid hands, decent enough route running. What's great about Trey McBride, though, kind of similar with George Kittle is that not only is he a good receiving threat, he's a great blocker. Trey McBride is one of the better top-of-the-line tight ends in terms of blocking. So that's something he has going for him. In terms of being a receiving threat, like I was just saying with Michael Wilson on the Cardinals, who are you going to try to cover? It's not that we have 3 elite dudes that you have to lock up because they're all so young and, we don't know what Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be like exactly, or Michael Wilson, or Trey McBride. But what we do know is that they have the ability to be fantastic players, especially in this system and on this team with Kyler as their quarterback. Trey McBride is someone I see getting a lot of looks, a lot of hits from Kyler. He's going to want to be, he'll need a safe man. He'll need someone to dump the ball off to when he's in trouble. And Trey McBride is more that person I see being than anything else. This is going to be a great season for him. I'm excited to see what he does. Next up for tight ends, Dalton Kincaid, another year 2 guy. Last season he gets drafted to Buffalo and has a fine year. He's kind of splitting reps with Dawson Knox. He had a fine rookie season. At this point now, I'm looking at the Bills roster. I'm looking at the lack of weapons and receivers and just realizing, okay, you got Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid, who you spent a first-round pick on not that long ago. It's time to use them. We're in year 2 with him now. Based off of last year, I'd say he's ready to get those kind of looks. He's ready to be first on the depth chart and, had the offense kind of ran through him a lot. Dalton Kincaid is very good athlete. He sits in zone spots really well. He kind of, again, I like making comparisons and stuff. He reminds me a little bit more of a Travis Kelce sort of receiver where he's just kind of a really good athlete that's fluid and just kind of moves in soft spots and lets their athletic quarterback just hit him whenever they see him. He has a great frame, great hands, makes good catches. Like I said, he's a fluid, really good athlete, especially run after catch. His ability there is great. He's someone I would look to pick up in fantasy. That's Dalton Kincaid. On to my next tight end. This one I'm pretty interested in. I think this was a pretty fun pull in my opinion. Juwan Johnson, a former receiver turned tight end on the New Orleans Saints. When he was able to play last season for the Saints, he looked really good. He looked really solid and like he knew what he was doing. He's came along quite a bit. He's older, but he doesn't have a beat-up body or a lot of reps on his history, especially at tight end. Like I said, he was a former receiver. So Juwan Johnson is someone I've been keeping an eye on. The problem I have with him is I'm not a big believer in the Saints or Derek Carr, so I don't know how that plays out. But just in terms of him as a tight end, I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up being one of Derek Carr's favorite, options to go to. Juwan Johnson is very flexible. You can move him around all over the field. He's gotten better as an inline tight end that can, have his hand in the dirt. It's still not his strong suit, but he is better at it. And he's someone that I see as a very athletic threat that you can use all over the place and use that former receiver in him to get mismatches against linebackers and even safeties. He's a really athletic guy. Someone I'm, also going to keep an eye on. Looking at this tight end room, he at this point should be the tight end one, except for Taysom Hill, who is still effective and good, but age is coming up a little bit. And I think Juwan Johnson brings something interesting they're going to want to keep an eye on. So the stats based off the last couple seasons wouldn't tell you that, this is going to be a crazy year for him, but I'm telling you, keep an eye on Juwan Johnson. It's going to be a good year for him. That is going to wrap up my 2024 breakout candidates for this next NFL season. Let me know what you guys thought. Thank you so much for watching.